you should be good.
Yep. Cool, cool. Of course, now I have the game by mistake, so let's down the game a little bit. There we go. That better? Testing. Cool, that looks about right. Okay. Let's get rid of all of this stuff. Streaming that on the internet was probably not the best idea, but whatever. Okay, so welcome to our case study of Mandagon, for one of our last workshops of the quarter. I just wanted to talk about a game and a subject that I think is really interesting in game design, which is looking at how games can tell stories as games. And I think Mandagon is a game that is, one, really accessible, which is good, and two, it does a lot of, pushing how we can tell a story through games, right? Because Mandagon is not a game that tells a story adjacent to the game, right? There are no cutscenes, there's no scrolling text. It is a game that has a very strong story, and it tells that story purely through the gameplay. And so I wanted to study how it does that, where it succeeds, where it fails. Okay, so why is this a topic worth talking about, other than the fact that I'm a nerd and I like it? So we, as game designers, as a medium, are very, very good at understanding how to make games engaging to play, right? We've found the fun. We know how to make a fun game when we try. This is not a hard thing to do, right? We've been cranking out really fun games like Doom since the 90s. We know how to make one at the drop of a hat when we want to, over and over and over again. What we aren't very good at is telling complex, meaningful stories through games, right? Our games tend to be fun pastimes, but not really scratch the surface. We're not really good at taking that and making it into a fun, meaningful story, right? Even our best storytelling games, right? The Last of Us, for example, who is constantly lording over us, really are read better as movies or motion comics intercut with gameplay than as games that themselves tell the story, right? The storytelling of The Last of Us is not gameplay storytelling. The storytelling in The Last of Us is movie storytelling, and then there just happens to be gameplay segments in between that, right? And very few games aren't like that. There are exceptions, right? We do get Braid, which is another fantastic game that tells its story primarily through gameplay. We do get Undertale and Journey and games like that really do use their gameplay to tell their story, but those are few and far between compared to games that really just have a story next to the gameplay. And even then, creating these kinds of games, these are all individual masterpiece strokes of luck by really passionate creators. We don't know how to replicate these en masse, right? We have somewhere in the single digits of successfully telling a story through gameplay, you could easily argue. So how do we tell? And then of course, the really big argument, why do we even try? If games aren't good at this, why do we even want to tell stories through gameplay? And I would make the argument that games have the potential to be really, really amazing storytelling experiences because they break the barrier between player and main character. Right? There's one thing when you look at a story and you look at a main character and you go, well, that person's such an idiot. I would never do that. Games, you don't have that luxury. If you have to play a story, you don't have the luxury of saying, oh, I wouldn't do that. You have to do it. If you wouldn't do it, cool, find another way through the level, right? You are yourself forced with the choices. You are forced with the consequences of, wait, oh, I did make that decision irrefutably, right then, right there. And I think there's a lot of really powerful storytelling we can use if we tap into this concept that, you are the main character, you are part of the story. The decisions made in this story are decisions that you personally made, and what does that mean about you as a person? Any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, misgivings about what I hope to set out to do in this workshop and why I'm trying to do it? Cool. So, Mandagon. So this is the part where we get into spoilers. Show of hands, who's actually played Mandagon? Cool. Sorry, we can't go through this workshop without spoiling the game.
That's fine.
It's an hour-long game. You're not spoiling much. Okay, so it is an hour-long platformer that tells a narrative. For those of you who didn't figure out the story or might have forgotten it, right? The story of Mandagon is about a father who gives up his body, his lungs, his life, because you can't live without functioning lungs, so that his daughter, whose lungs are failing, can live on. And this is framed through this father's journey into the Tibetan afterlife. And the thing that makes this game and its story really, really special is the fact that at no point is there a cutscene, at no point is there a scrolling text that explains to you this is what happened in this game, right? We barely get premonitions through this through little snippets of text and images hidden off the side of the screen. Where the story is really told and the themes and the characters are really developed is in the gameplay. And some places I think it really succeeds, and some places it kind of stumbles. And I want to explore and see what we can't learn about how we might not try to tell equally complex and nuanced stories through our own gameplay. Any questions? Cool. So the first way that we can kind of talk about how we might approach telling stories through gameplay is by taking, right, a big part of how conventional medium tells stories is through the use of metaphor and the use of parallelism, right? And one of the things that we as games can do is we can also have metaphors and have parallels and use that as a vehicle to make statements and express parts of our story using our mechanics, right? Our mechanics can be metaphors. This is one of my favorite examples from Mandagon specifically, are these bird statues as a very important metaphor part of the story. Does anyone want to take a stab at why I wanted this as a metaphor? Or just why they think, or why they think I think, the bird statues are in Mandagon.
Wait, who is the they?
They, the designers of
Okay.
Mandagon. I think there were two people who designed this game.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw the trailer. It was like that thing is connected to like flight, or the thing is
Mhm.
up. So I was thinking like maybe, oh, if it's like the father's dying to save his daughter, that flight up might be like its extension towards like heaven.
Yeah. This game definitely really plays with the idea of moving upwards as this concept of ascension, right? The entire game is an ascension of the map. You start near the bottom, and as you play, you explore upwards. Though it's not purely upwards, you do have to backtrack down from side sometimes. The end point is actually in the middle of the map. Just for context, the way these things work is it's a platformer, so the game is mostly about making jumps and getting around the map by jumping. And these things, when you click or when you interact with them, you become tethered to them with that beam. While you have that beam on you and you stay in radius of that beam, you can just move in 2 dimensions as much as you want. No jumps, no trick. You just float anywhere you want. Just jumping is no longer a mechanic. You can just go fly over to that platform. Which is kind of a weird mechanic for a platformer.
There's only 2 of them.
Yes.
They're on the parallel sides of the map.
Yep. They remove an entire key mechanic of the game.
That's one thing I liked about the water is when you fell into water, you lost the ability to jump, so all you could do was move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fairly suffocating feeling to lose one of your key mechanics. But when you hit the bubble stream and you fly out, it is the most satisfying feeling like ever, because you're just like launched from the water and you're just launched way up in the air. And it's like, this is the jump I was waiting for. And so it makes going into the water something you don't like doing, but coming out of the water something you very much so do like doing.
Do we want to keep talking about the bird statues, or do we want to decide what he just said? Okay, well, let's come back to the bird statues. I want to point out a couple things you just said. First of all, I find it really, this is something that the writers, who I've already had them analyze this game for me, as from a writer's perspective, brought up a lot about this. And that I like that you just said this game has a very big motif of breath, right? The story is about lungs. So breath is a very common motif. And you just said the word suffocating, right? The water feels suffocating. Which I think is, that ties very much into this idea of the mechanics of metaphor, right? Is they're trying to develop this theme of breath in the game, and so one of their key mechanics is water, which takes away your ability to jump, suffocates the player, it stifles the player. This thing that is so vital to everything, how you interact with this game, is now taken away from you, and that parallels this feeling of you can't breathe. And then that also does this very interesting thing where it mirrors the arc. Right, because as you said, at the end, it creates this sense of, oh, I'm through the dark place. Oh, this is so much better now, right? Which I think is a very interesting thing to have in a game about traveling to the afterlife. Does anyone else want to add on to that?
Which is something I found weird, because when I went to the statues as well,
yeah,
I found them similarly suffocating, which is funny because it gives me all this mobility, but it took away it completely changed the way I accessed that mobility.
Right.
And so, not suffocating is not the right word. It was just a strange experience. I only went through it like 3 times because I kept on falling, but it's like not the same type of, the jump is a very satisfying jump and it's got all these swirls and stuff.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you don't jump with that high pitch, you slowly move upwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's much more gradual but consistent of a progression.
That is very good analysis of the feelings created by these. The point I was trying to make is that, generally speaking, in game design, if your game's about jumping, do you want to take away the player's ability to jump? If that's the thing that your game's about, if that's the thing that makes it fun. Do you want to take away the player's ability to jump? Do you want to take away the player's need to jump? No. So why did they do that? Why did they take away the player's ability to jump in the water? Why did they take away the player's need to jump with these statues? I would make the argument that this is a metaphor for the game's consensual themes of helping and selflessness, right? A very large part of this game's story is it's a story of help, right? And it's a story of helping other people. And I think these kind of stand to show, with help, you don't need to struggle. You don't need to jump if you just have someone to lift you up, right? And I think these kind of exist to play that metaphor, right? Anyone ever think of any other mechanics in the game?
The elevators?
That might be metaphors for something?
The elevator's probably a very similar metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
They're not as liberating as the ability to just fly wherever you want, but it's definitely, I can't make it up there. Oh, here are slow elevators and really, really quick elevators, and I'd like both of them.
Yeah.
The quick elevator a little bit more, but
Definitely. Yep.
one thing I did notice is one of those things, it's very obvious where you're supposed to go. Like the moment you start, you're like, okay, I need to go there. The other one is off screen when you get there for the first time. And so you have to like kind of go, I should just go up, and then you'll make it to that place up there, and it's like a little bit of a jump of like either looking at the map or going, I wonder what's higher type situation.
It's a very interesting thing to notice. I didn't notice that.
I didn't recognize where the place was the first time across, so I noticed it.
So what do you think that's doing to serve the game as a story, or is it doing nothing to serve the game?
I think that, so thematically, sometimes it's not always apparent that there's something above you, and it's not always apparent that, I mean, we had the map, but ignoring the map, which is just a practical way of saying, no, you're not done. It's not always apparent that the step you need to take to get to the next area, the progression is not always, sometimes you gotta make a jump of maybe there is something up there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. So let's look at what are things that we like about this way of telling stories through a mechanic. What are the strengths of this approach to storytelling?
It's interactive, and that keeps the player's attention and
Yep, you're using mechanics. Players are interacting with these parts of the story.
And even if the player does not read every single text box, and kind of, even though they go and find the text box, they kind of just don't pay attention because whatever, they still get a lot of the feeling of the game, even if they don't know that the story is about a dad who's trying to get lungs for his daughter. They do know that the story is about a progression of movement at a very consistent pace, and like a lot of the feelings and emotions are still there because they are getting those emotions from interacting with the mechanics that produce those emotions, even if they don't go and read every single text blurb.
Awesome. Can you think of a strength to using mechanics as metaphors to tell your story, making your mechanics a metaphor for your story?
I mean, it's a little hard to do with mechanics, but I usually feel that when you do that, you give the player more control over the pace of the story and how it kind of unveils.
What are the downsides to doing your story this way? Why would you not want to make your mechanics
good? You better make sure your mechanics are good. And the mechanics you can use are limited to ones that work with the story.
Yeah. Does it naturally lend itself to good mechanics? Is the bird statue a good mechanic?
It's not a very interesting mechanic after you do it the first 2 times, but there's only 2 of them. So
yeah.
Like, if this game was 5 times longer, I would have hated it.
Yeah.
They had to keep it to the shorter length.
I also think that it should be like very polished mechanics, because if you fail jump, then you have to restart the puzzle, or if you hit a wall and it somehow clips you in some way that the designers didn't intend for it, then you get something different out of it that wasn't in their vision.
I wish the ability to teleport wasn't there. Which the moment I saw I could teleport, I teleported. But I wish it wasn't there because it's not even that big of a map. It's not really like super necessary. And I missed out on a whole experience of traveling back up a way because I'd already been there, so I just teleported back. But instead of getting the experience of climbing up and placing it, I got the experience of climbing up, not having the stuff, climbing back down, and then, or teleporting back down, going to the place that had the stuff, and then just teleporting back.
Right.
Which, even though it was the most efficient path, so I took it,
Yeah.
it probably wasn't the best path for the story. It would have been probably more emotionally satisfying to make the mistake, go down, and then solve the mistake later.
Do you have anything else to add about mechanics of metaphor? Okay. So another related approach is mirroring the materials in your mechanics. We've kind of already talked about this with the water. But another way that you can try to create a story in your gameplay is not just use your mechanics as a metaphor, right? Don't just make this something that you can look at in an English paper and say, aha, you see how this is raising you up and it's helping you? That's how other people in real life can raise you up and help you. But actually, mechanics create a certain emotional experience as the player interacts with that mechanic. And if you're a clever game designer, you can make it so that the emotional and the experience of those mechanics mirrors the emotional experience of your game, right? We've already kind of talked about this a little bit with how the emotional experience of playing with the water is, this moment of suffocation followed by this moment of awe, and so you can, on a macro level, right? Mandagon is a slow, kind, calm story, right? It's not a story of great drama or great events. It's this peaceful little story of just some people living their lives, doing the best they can. And at the same time, the game Mandagon, right, is not a really epic, challenging, dramatic game. It's a peaceful, quiet little game that's largely relaxing to play and fairly unpunishing when you miss a jump, right? Kind of mirroring the tone there. Right, the gameplay is slow, long periods of time pass between challenging jumps. When you do have a challenging jump, the game tends to be pretty forgiving to you. You can take the game at your own pace.
One thing I noticed is a lot of the challenging jumps tend to have the space where you're trying to get to and a next secondary space below it. That if you missed the first one, you'll get onto the second one.
Yep. Right, the gameplay doesn't want to punish you. The game wants to be kind, because it's a story about kindness. We can, do this on a more micro level. What are some particularly emotional, or what are just some particular mechanics from Mandagon that evoke emotions? We already talked about the water. This game doesn't actually have that many mechanics. We might be running the well pretty dry. Do you have any else?
No.
There's the mechanic of picking up pieces and then taking those pieces to where they go.
Right.
And so the experience is like one of discovery and uncovering the truth and whatnot. Though it is simplified by like the fact that all the pieces tend to be right next to the place where they go.
Right.
But it has this, I found this piece, because you see the first piece before you even see the first arch.
Right.
Before you even know that arches are a thing.
Right.
And so you just pick it up because, well, it's an item and this is a game.
Right.
And other reasons, I'd probably pick it up if it was me in real life and there was a cool little floating item.
Right.
And then you get to the thing and you go, oh, this has a purpose. And so it's like this slowly uncovering of purpose for the game world.
This experience of slow discovery, that mirrors the experience of the game.
And just uncovering, so like you're going to the afterlife in this game, and so as you uncover truths about the world, then you uncover through these little pieces, then you get closer to the afterlife and you get closer to finishing the game.
What are advantages to this approach? Why would we want to, tune our players' emotional experience with the mechanics to mirror the emotional experience of the game? Yes.
I feel like most of the time when people are playing a game, they come with like the intent to feel a certain feeling, like this would be peaceful if they wanted to do like a relaxing day, or if they wanted to do something that's really challenging. The mechanics of the game should be really challenging, or difficult, like Dark Souls, something like that. And yeah, it just matches what they want, and then it gives them what they're looking for, and feelings.
Are there other advantages to doing mechanics that mirror the emotional experience? I'd argue it makes the game more resonant. I mean, it makes the story feel better if you really can engage with the emotions. You know, if it's not there, if the story is just like, this story clearly wants me to feel sad, but I don't feel sad right now, that can feel kind of superficial and shallow. In way of disadvantages, I would argue the big disadvantage here is that this doesn't actually tell your story. Right? The player isn't going to know what your story was, they're just going to know how your story was meant for them to feel. Any other advantages or disadvantages people would add? Okay. Next slide. This is a statement that people make about games of storytelling. Everything meaningful should be mechanically meaningful. Right? If it matters to your story, it matters to your gameplay. This has merit, right? There is a reason you would want to argue this. Mechanics can give concrete weight to things in your story. Right? Your mechanics have a certain level of concrete meaning. Right? That's what the player is there for. That is what the players are trying to achieve. The player is trying to interact with the mechanics and win. That has a certain level of concreteness that your story, which the player is just outside of, doesn't have. Not to say that your mechanics have concreteness, but you know, it adds meaning. The mechanics, if you're doing them well, should have meaning to the player, and if you can use them to lend meaning to the story by extension. They help the player feel more engaged in the world and more one with their main character, right? Because they align with the characters the player is trying to do with what the character is trying to do, and they align with the player wants and what the character wants, right? So it's not like, oh, my character wants to go over here, but I, the player, want to go over here. It's like, no, we both want to go this way, right? This is both the narrative drive that's driving my character and the mechanical drive that's driving me, and it helps things feel more in tune, right? When they kind of fight each other, they can kind of pull you out of the game a little bit, right? I remember playing like Portal, and you know the character has to go put the potato on the rig, and I'm just like, I as the player have no incentive to put this potato on the rig. I know that this will make the rest of the game harder for me. The only reason I'm doing this is because the story needs this to happen. I don't have any mechanical incentive. And my mechanical incentive is to make the rest of the puzzles as easy as possible. Why would I put the potato there and make everything hard, right? That kind of pulls you out of the game, pulls you out of the story. The big problem with this is it's kind of an oversimplification. There are lots of things that the player will care about that aren't a part of your story. You know, players will get, if you're doing good characters, players will get invested in your characters. And then they'll care about the characters, right? They're for their own sake, without mechanical need. Right? Look at people who play CRPGs. Look at people who play BioWare games. They get really invested in those characters for no good reason. Right? They don't have that much mechanical weight. They're just there to flesh out your party. But they're invested in them for their own reasons. They don't need mechanical backing them up. Or, you know, look at games that allow you to, like, look at Minecraft and the ability to customize your house. Players get really invested in making their houses look pretty, but that has no mechanical sway, right? Saying you need mechanical sway for the player to care about something is really an oversimplification. But at the same time, you do want, it can really help give the player a lot of reason to care about something if it does line up mechanically. Any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, misgivings, examples, counterexamples? Refuted claims.
Is this like pressing F to pay respects?
Yes, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Don't press F to pay respects. Right? Because like that's just like I'm just doing this silly little action to move the plot forward, but it's this big meaningful thing for your character. And so that's kind of a mismatch there. I also think that probably part of the reason they did do press F to pay respects is they wanted you to have that they were probably trying to give it some mechanical gravitas, right? They were trying to make it so that it's like you know, like, hey, the player has to do something. The player has to actively say this, but
It
but
falls flat on its face.
it falls
when you
flat on
take
the
in
face when you're-
context of the rest of the game.
because the F mechanic, the press F mechanic, doesn't have that same weight, right? It doesn't line up.
It's just a do something mechanic.
It's it's basically the same mechanic as, you know, press to continue,
Yeah.
which that doesn't have a mechanical weight.
It's not like you were maintaining the health of a bunch of people in your party and you
Yeah.
had to choose to let some person's health go to 0 in order to save the party or complete the mission. It was, this happened because you couldn't do anything to stop it, now press a
Yeah.
button to continue.
Yeah. There's no mechanical weight. If all things else being the same, let's take a tangent to actually, you know, use what we've learned so far. Just hopefully not nothing. How would we approach press F to pay respects? If we had just that scene, the rest of the game we can't change. But the press F to pay respects moment, we as the game designers can redesign. How would we do it?
I wouldn't.
What would you do?
Just
I would
not
have just a cutscene.
Hmm.
It's already a cutscene that doesn't need to be.
And what's your argument?
My argument is that if I can't change anything else in the rest of the game, then the significance of the event is the significance of the event. Either the player cares or the player doesn't care, and pressing a button or adding a bunch of stuff that they have to do now that the life of the person is actually dead. You can no way influence their life, it's happened.
Mhm.
Doing a bunch of stuff at their funeral will in no way change how they feel about the dead character.
What are some other ways we can do this?
I keep thinking about like, what's it called? What's the one where aliens invaded and it's a strategy game and it's turn-based?
XCOM?
Yes, I keep thinking about XCOM. I name my characters, I give them funny names, I dress them up in funny outfits. I don't really care about them, but when one of them dies, I am like, oh no, please don't die, because mechanically I've built them up into this ultra super awesome warrior, and they're super important to me, so when one of them dies, it is a terrible experience.
Right. That you know, the mechanics of investing all this time and resource in this character mirror the experience, the story of investing all this relationship and this care in this
Yeah.
person. So how? Well, let's not think about. I want to challenge us to not think about death, doing death well. Death is done.
Okay.
Let's do a. How do we do funerals as a mechanic?
To like bring out more emotion from the players.
Yeah.
Good bad idea, board.
Dialogue trees, maybe turn the cutscene into a more like space where the player can explore.
Why?
Maybe they can speak to the people attending the funeral and then press F to play respects when they're done with the scene, you know, however they want to play it out.
And why is that important? Why not just have one big long scene where a whole bunch of different people talk?
Because the player will have the choice of either ending the cutscene there or having the time to explore more context about the character who just died.
And why is that an important choice to give the player?
I think they get to decide their own pacing there.
Okay.
I feel like pacing is important because if that's the experience they want out of like their shooter game, then they don't need to go through that. But if it's a character that they're really attached to, then they.
But we are the game designers. We know the experience the player should have. We are the architects of the experience. The player is simply coming out of us to receive the experience.
I want them to work for it.
So we
I
want
want to meet
them,
them halfway. I want, at least give them the option.
we want them to have an emotionally impactful
We should've-
funeral.
If they mess up their own experience, that's on our heads. If they ruin their game for themselves, we're the ones who fucked up. We're responsible for making sure they have a good experience. They have zero responsibility. They're the customer.
Well, it's not a very intense moment. There's not much you can miss.
I'm thinking, so I'm trying to, currently, in fact, I haven't played that game in forever, so currently that game is you have like a little cutscene, and then you take a couple steps forward, and then you press F, and the cutscene ends, or something like that.
Maybe you would add like after you press F, there's an extra little scene where like the people around get some sort of like approval or something like that, like at a regular funeral, when you see in real life.
Mechanics. Or designers.
Oh yeah, mechanics.
Not writers.
True.
So my first inclination is the ability to not pay respects. So the ability to just leave. And
why?
so, like, if you just leave, because there are many emotional reasons behind it. So one of the first ones is depending on the state of the player. I can't remember the rest of the game. If the death of the player is enraging the player, then leaving it might be a way for the player to say, no, I don't have time to mourn right now. I've got to go take care of business for the guys who killed my friend. And so that is a emotional state a player might be in, and so the leave ability might be something they want to do. But there's also there's a bunch of different emotional states that the player could be in, and the leave ability would grant them, first of all, it would give the choice, it would make the decision to pay respects a decision instead of just something that you do. But the ability to leave has a bunch of different emotional ideas behind it of, I don't really care, or no, I've got something to do, I can't mourn for you right now, there's business to take care of. There's a bunch of different emotional states where leaving is the appropriate answer. And there's a bunch of different emotional states where paying respect is the appropriate answer. And just simply giving them that choice will make them consider, what state am I in, instead of, okay, I gotta continue. And if they have to consider what state am I in, why do I have the ability to just leave? Do I wanna leave? Why do I wanna leave? And gives them the options of, hey, here at this funeral, this guy was killed. He was killed by people who are still out there. I don't have time. Or he was killed by people still out here, but it's his funeral. I'm going to stay here for the funeral. I'm going to listen to the preacher. I'm going to do the gun salute. And I'm going to pay respects. And that's just the decision of going back out there to fight, or stopping, slowing down, and paying respects to your friend. And if, like, you could even have it where if you choose to leave, then when you finish the game, you return to his graveyard and then do the pay respects thing for stuff, for like the emotional satisfaction of satisfaction probably isn't the right word, but the emotional
Catharsis.
completeness, catharsis of it's done.
I personally really like the idea of forcing players to think about things by giving them choices. Right? Giving the player a choice and then letting them just sit there and ruminate on their own choice, I think is a very powerful thing to do in storytelling with gameplay personally.
Like make them ask, why do I have this choice?
Another thing that I would consider doing is making it so that when you press F, you actually have mechanical consequences, right? Like, you know, you lose your teammate's favorite piece of equipment from the game forever. This is your grenadier? Cool. You don't get a rocket launcher for the rest of the game. You put the rocket launcher on his tombstone.
Yeah.
And it's there. Because, you know, we want to capture this feeling of saying goodbye, of letting go of this thing. But it matters to the character. The character is letting go, right? The character is letting go of their friendship. The player doesn't have that friendship. The player doesn't have to let go of that friendship. The player doesn't, even if the player has that friendship, they don't have to let go of that friendship. They can just go restart the game. So we want the players to have to let go of something that matters to them. It's a rocket launcher, right?
Say like,
And that then
When they-
mirrored, right, and the gameplay experience of, oh no, I have to lose my rocket launcher, kind of, in a very unsanctimonious and irreverent way, mirrors the base feeling of letting go of a friendship. Right? It's still letting go at the end of the day.
yeah.
At least that's how I would approach it.
So like when they die and
Yeah.
the gameplay that comes up to it, you get this fairly incredible scene where you get their super awesome weapon,
Mm-hmm.
which is very enjoyable to use. But in order to pay respects, you have to give up that super awesome weapon. But if you leave, you can take the super awesome weapon and beat the entire game with it.
I mean, I think these two ideas are both good, but I don't know if they're necessarily compatible.
No.
You'd have to change what happens outside of that one scene though.
Yeah. Well, only a tiny bit.
Tiny.
Anyways. Maybe I'm playing with my own rules, but we're game designers. We get to bend the rules because we write the rules. Anyways. Any further questions, comments, concerns after that very long-winded tangent? Okay. This is a related thing, but actually tying this into Mandagon.
Oh yeah.
It should. Those should be the matter within the story. It should matter in the game. Whoops. Fix that. Yeah. Spoilers. So this is a very related concept. This is basically part 2. Of just kind of looking this in the window of Mandagon. Because the big thing that I'm going to point out here is that there is something very meaningful in the story of Mandagon that is not mechanically present at all. Where's the daughter? Why don't we have a daughter in the mechanics?
Because the whole point of the story is that she's not coming with you, and that you're kind of leaving her behind.
We could make a mechanical representation of like the daughter parting wishes, following you as far as she can, and then fading out by the end of the game. Right? If we wanted to, we could make a mechanic that represents the daughter. So why isn't there one? Or is there one?
Why should there be one?
Because the daughter matters to the main character.
Yeah.
Daughter should matter to the player. And if it helps, follow-up question, which might actually be a better leading question. What does Mandagon choose to emphasize with the mechanics? What do the mechanics spend time making the player care about?
Jumping.
Like, yes, it is a platformer. Also, fair warning, it's 7 minutes to 4. For those of you who need to leave, you may. Else we're just going to keep chugging along until we run out of stuff to talk about. Anyone have an answer to these questions? We want to hear my answer to these questions.
I want to hear your answer.
So, door. I would make the argument that Mandagon, with its mechanics, chooses to emphasize the emotional arc of the story, right? It chooses to emphasize the conflicts and mechanic of helping and giving and grieving. And that, it decides that the fact that it's your daughter that you helped isn't what matters to the story, right? That's not what's important. What's important is the emotional arc, and that's what they chose to mirror.
Okay. So instead of mirroring the exact story that is happening, it's mirroring the story of helping people in general.
Right. Because I would argue that that's the story that matters to the storytellers here. Any follow-up questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, and settings? Okay. And then I'm just going to follow straight into the next slide with this last one. Part of this is, mechanics can be a really great way to punctuate beats, right? Just as they can accentuate other things in other moments in game, in storytelling, they can also accentuate story beats. And the one big story beat that gets activated mechanically, the ending. Right? The ending is very mechanically distinct from the rest of the game, and they really use that to make the ending impactful. Have you played Mandagon?
No.
Okay. How? What did they do with the ending?
So the door opens.
Yep.
You go through the door.
Yep.
You have 2 slow rising elevators. And then you have a central one on your left, one on your right. You choose whichever one you want. Then you have a central slow rising elevator. And then you talk to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the moment you talk to him, you lose all control. I'm pretty sure you can press buttons that go through his dialogue faster. I haven't tested. And then he talks and has a conversation with you for a minute, and then it ends.
Mm-hmm. The game takes away control from you. Again, this is the thing that we usually don't want to do. We want to give the players agency. But the game decides that no.
But you're standing in front of that. What control do you have?
Exactly. Right? The game decides that no, this is a moment where you don't have agency anymore. You're done traveling. You're done jumping. You've made it. Right? And it punctuates that with the mechanics of you just move. Your character just gets moved for you. Right? You still move upwards, but your character just moves up on its own. You don't have to press any buttons. And that exists, right, to punctuate this moment in the story, to drive home what that story moment is about. It also subverts just mechanical affordances in general, right? Press X to listen. That's not a very common thing to see in games. You usually see, and this is something that the writing department pointed out to me, you usually see press X to talk. But they decided that they were going to use their mechanics to subvert that expectation. And they deliberately said, no, this is not a moment about talking. This is a moment about listening. And they subverted the affordance. Right? So they did they broke away from what the player was expecting, what the player was trying to know. To hunt in that this is not a moment, that this is a moment about listening, very specifically and very deliberately. Any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, misgivings about endings? Or about punctuating story beats with mechanics? Okay.
So a mechanic
Yeah.
can not only be something, a punctuation of a story beat through a mechanic can not only be having a mechanic do it, but taking away mechanics
Yeah.
is punctuating story beats through mechanics.
Yep. Anything that you can make the mechanics change in some way that is meaningful to the player, that can be really used to accentuate a story beat. Either by, adding on to what the players can do, such as how Portal allows the player to such as how Portal, the original, accentuates that final story beat by changing the map, the level layout from individual discrete little contained levels to one big open world to run around in for that last level, to punctuate the story beat of you have broken free, to how this game chooses to just take away all the mechanics and say, no, there are no mechanics anymore. Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, misgivings? Okay, I think, yeah, that actually is the end. So, thank you for talking with me about a game that I really like for an hour. Hopefully, we can learn lessons from games like Mandagon and games that have tried to tell their stories not just through dialogue and through cinematics, but actually, use their mechanics to accentuate the story. And the sky's the limit in seeing how we can tell stories that are that much more meaningful because the player themselves has to go through the story. Or this is nothing, and me and a handful of other fringe game designers just like to rave about this concept.
Have you played Abzu?
I have not.
Oh, it's fun. I think it does something fairly similar. But instead of taking away your mechanics right there at the end, it gives you basically one of the most awesome mechanics ever, because you're like bringing life back to a world somehow.
Interesting.
And so it's like you are the most powerful thing ever type. It's like the greatest experience.
That's really cool.
God.
Well, not exactly. So you're swimming the whole time,
Yeah.
and now you're like swimming really, really fast, and you can jump out of the water and you go flying up in the air, and there's a bunch of fish following you.
That's
and
really
it's
cool.
Really awesome.
Yeah, that's right. The mechanics have fundamentally changed. Your speed's increased. You can now jump out of the water, and that.
I mean, you could jump out of the water
Quite nice.
earlier, but it was at a less.
Yeah. That serves to punctuate this moment, to make this moment mechanically meaningful as well as
Abzu's a really cool game.
Did you
Sounds like-
buy Abzu?
Yeah, I got it on Steam. It's like $15. Something like that.
Actually, I couldn't think of a reason to buy that game.
What?
Because there's a big game.
Yeah, it's a very neat experience. Like I've played a couple walking simulators, and I'm not the biggest fan of them in general. But Abzu is different because it's not like you walk to a place and then you pick up an item and you read some things and then someone says something. No, there's like no text at all. You like swim through this world, and if you want to go look at that mural that has a bunch of stuff on it, you can go swim to look at the mural that has a bunch of stuff on it. And there's a little bit more. There's no like enemies or anything, but it's a little bit more mechanically inclined than just walking.
Mm-hmm.
There's more stuff you do.
What are the mechanics?
Well,
You're swimming, lots of swimming.
there's swimming.
You can grab onto
I haven't
large
played it in
enough
a
fish.
while. Yeah, and kind of guide them.
And then you can read about the fish too.
Yeah, but there's other stuff. So like, you've got like a little sensor dude who follows you around, and you can have him go beat, and that helps you find stuff in like the sand, and then you uncover the sand stuff, and then you pick up some items, and then you go to the next area. And once you have all the items, there's like chains and doors and some light puzzle solving, and then every once in a while there's a current, which you go through it. It's very similar to the final speed increase, but it's less control. And as you go through it, it doesn't do anything, but there's swarms of fish. Swarm isn't the right word. There's schools of fish, and if you run into them, it makes a nice little sound and they follow you. It doesn't. Nothing is really. The purpose of it isn't to challenge you. It isn't to do all this stuff, but it's just to make you feel peaceful and have all these things. And it has this mode where you can just follow fish around.
Is there a VR experience for it yet?
Probably. I don't know.
If there is, I would buy it.
I got it forever ago, and I really like it, but I don't play it often because it's not like
It's not a game.
challenging.
It's an art
or anything.
experience.
Yeah.
But is there a difference
I wouldn't
there?
say it is.
100% there is, and I would not pay for art.
It's an interesting argument to have.
Actually, I'm gonna have to counteract myself on that because I would consider Telltale games an art because I'm not doing shit there. So
I play Telltale games. I feel like I had more control of the story in Abzu than in a Telltale game.
I think you're right. I think I'm wrong.
Telltale games are interesting. I mean, you're doing about as much stuff as you are in Mandagon.
Yeah.
Mandagon's free, but there's a lot more stuff in.
Yeah, one that's an hour long.
I would say
If you're taking your time.
a 4 to 5 hour
Which is
game in
free.
Abzu, plus like a beautiful music, plus like little things where you can just sit and just look at the screen, and it's basically the most relaxing screensaver ever.
Those fish ones are pretty beautiful.
Yeah. And a fairly interesting story. I haven't like looked into it to see what the story like actually was, but I've got a rough idea of like how it's actually going. very satisfying ending. The ending is like the best part of the entire game.
Any other questions, comments, concerns, tangents, random thoughts while you have the undivided attention like half the design department? Huh? Oh, we have an odd number of officers.
Wasn't that?
Yeah, half. Arguably, but round it up, whatever.
Anyways,
So more than that.
anything? Alright. Thank you guys for coming.